This time on Poll Hub, our first battleground state polls of 2024 are out. What are Georgians and North Carolinians thinking? We're looking at these early results and we're explaining how to interpret them. Then, ChatGPT and other AI tools have sparked a lot of discussion in education. Some educators have worried that AI helps kids cheat, while others are mandating its use to prepare students for the world ahead. We're bringing Marist students and educators on to talk about it. And we end with the days of our lives. No, not the soap opera, but literally the days of our lives. What did Americans think were the best and worst times of life back in 1971? We've got our thoughts. Lots to do, so let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jenny Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Athen Hollis. I'm Rebecca Hendricks.
And I am Lee Maringoff.
So we are in 2024, an election year, and one of the things we like to do in an election year, in a national election year, is go to the states. Because national elections, as we know, as we have all learned in our civics classes, or in 2016 and 2020, presidents are elected by an electoral college. So it matters which states are where, how they're doing in individual states. Two battleground states are our first leadoff that we're doing this season. We were in Georgia and we were in North Carolina. In both cases, Trump is ahead slightly, but let's put the proviso down. This is March. It's a long way to November. But there's a lot of interesting stuff under the covers. We asked a lot of questions other than, hey, who are you going to vote for in 6 months? Barb, let me start with you. And then Lee, we'll come over and talk about some of what it means. But give us a couple of the numbers that stood out to you and you can pick either state, whichever one you want to start with. It's dealer's choice.
Well, you know something, I actually want to talk about why we did these states at all.
Okay.
These are two of the states that we are going to be watching through November because they're what we call battleground states. They were close last time, particularly North Carolina has voted for a Democrat or Republican, depending upon the presidential cycle. And just as a kind of a review, Biden won Georgia by 0.3 of a percentage point last time. Remember those 11,000 votes that Trump was allegedly trying to find. And then North Carolina was a Trump state, but only by 1.3 percentage points. So to say these states are close ones is an understatement. And I suspect this time around, they are not going to disappoint either. What we do see this time around is that, as you noted, Jay, that Trump is actually right now edging out President Biden by just a bit in both states. 3 points separate them. The toss-up right now is 51 Trump, 48 Biden in North Carolina. And he is ahead 4 percentage points in Georgia. And the numbers there are 51-47. They sound pretty similar. I think what's really interesting is the fact that both of these candidates have very strong support from their bases. I mean, these are like 95, 5 kinds of support, Democrats and Republicans respectively. But there's a lot going on under the hood, particularly among independents, and how some of the, what we characterize as their traditional base is swishing around a little bit. And what I mean by that is when we look at President Biden, we see, some interesting caution signs. I don't want to say danger signs, but because it's so early, but caution signs in the sense that he is not doing as well in these states among Black voters. He is not doing as well as he did 4 years ago among young voters. And some of those voters, not necessarily his Democratic base, but, those that may identify also as independent. And for Trump, I think some of the caution signs have to do with the fact that he may be under some, legal questions, as we go into November. How far those progress is not clear, but in both states, a large proportion of voters, and this has grown, believe that he has done something illegal. Another group believes that he has done something unethical during his time as president. So those are certainly things that we need to watch for both going forward.
So Lee, pick a state. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, I'm going to say that one of the things we've learned in the last 20 years is the conventional wisdom just doesn't apply anymore. And so, we're getting surprises, many of which are centered around Donald Trump. But this election has a huge unique quality to it in that both of these people are older than I am. They both have been president. They both have run against each other. We don't get rematches all that often. So, yeah, so you look in, and I think Barb hit a lot of the key points. I think neither of these states are must-wins, but in a close electoral college, they become kind of like you don't want to go into election day with having cost either of these states. What I'm struck by in some of the points Barb made about young people right now are sort of not where Biden would like them to be. Black voters are not where Biden would like them to be. He's doing better among white voters, as Barb indicated, and I find that interesting. So there's two groups. And Jay, I know we've talked about this. We have, who can be persuaded and who's really paying attention and who's going to end up turning out. And I think that is going to be the tail of the tape in the end. So right now, there's not a lot of persuadable voters out there. These folks are known in both states. Their name recognition and people have opinion on it's like 99% in both, and just literally a handful of people who won't weigh into that. What is interesting is in both states that if you dislike both of them, you're more likely to go for a Biden, or if you just disapprove of Biden, then Biden gets a hunk of those. So those are also new things to care about.
When you say, let me be clear, when you say just disapprove, we ask a scale there. So what you're talking about is if 5 is I hate him and 1 is I love him, 4 is I just disapprove.
That's
for lack of a better way of explaining. So what you're talking about is the people who aren't like, God, I hate him, I'm never going to vote for him. They're just like, I really don't approve of him, but we have seen them end up voting for him and for Democrats in early elections.
And so you can actually win if you only have a 40% approval rating, whereas in olden times, that was like landslide against you. But Jay, what's your sense here on who is in the numbers? What are we talking to? Are these going to be the people we're going to be talking to in October? Demographically, they may look the same, but you have a sense that this isn't really where it is yet. It isn't baked in.
Well, it's not who we're talking to. I mean, we're talking to random samples. We're talking to people that are not any different than we're going to be talking to in the fall. I do think that there are people who pay an awful lot of attention to politics. I've talked about it before. Like, they treat it as a sport. And I don't think this is a majority by any stretch of the imagination of Americans. And I think you talked about this. This is a rematch that nobody wants. We've almost never had it. Nobody likes not nobody. A lot of people don't like either of these guys. And I think if you look at the way that people treat things that they don't want to talk about and don't like and aren't interested in necessarily, is they'll just kind of give an answer. They'll go, whatever. And that if it's not something they have to decide on this week or next week, it's not that they're giving you a dishonest answer. I just don't think they're giving you an answer that's really a well thought out answer. And why should it be? They don't have to decide until November, or with mail-in voting and early voting October. So I think that's something that even with everybody's attempts, and there's a lot of already likely voters, we're looking at those most likely to vote. Likely voter screens, as we've discussed in March, are, they could be a tricky thing. There's $100 million, $200 million, maybe $1 billion worth of advertising that is going to be run between now and November. I don't know that this tells us much more than gives us a baseline in both states, which I think is really important, because then you can see what the impact of 6 months, 8 months of electioneering and ads is going to have.
Well, along the lines of people searching, we also did ask a hypothetical toss-up, adding in a third party candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And we take a look at people who don't like Biden or Trump. And it's pretty interesting what happens to that group of voters when we add a third candidate. So what's your take on the impact that certainly RFK Jr. is not on the ballot in either of these states? Yes, he's in the process of trying to get on the ballot. But there is also Cornel West, who is trying to get on the ballot in a number of states. Any impact of these two-party of these third-party candidates, or is it all going to kind of wash away when people have to make that decision?
Well, right now, Robert Kennedy Jr. is not well known. Pundits have already been speculating, as we might now. But voters, he has a very high no opinion number. And when we look at who he's pulling more from, well, that's a subject of great speculation also, because we don't know. Right now, he's pulling about evenly from both. So part of it is he may be a positive for Democrats who are looking somewhere else to go, but maybe the anti-vaxxer vote is looking somewhere else to go also. So this is all very much still in the
I think the question about
trying.
I think the question about the third-party candidates is this 1992 when Ross Perot scored the largest or one of the largest third-party votes ever, or is this 2016 when Jill Stein and a couple of third-party candidates got very low numbers, but had a potentially, there is some argument about this, had a decisive impact in the election. Which is it? I don't think we know that yet, but I think that's the question.
We don't know. We'll save this for future, but right now I think it's the latter, not the former. I think they're not necessarily going to carry states, but they may influence who ends up carrying states, and that could be really important. I'll say one more footnote before we move on, and that is I thought it was kind of neat that when we asked people in Georgia whether they think their state and local elections are going to be fair and accurate, in other words, do they still believe in the integrity of the electoral process after all Georgia's been through with court cases and special Senate elections and 11,000 votes separating and all that? Well,
and more court cases.
Good news. 69%, I believe it was a figure, but certainly more than 2/3, say, yeah, we believe in fair and accurate elections are happening here. And that includes mostly Democrats, but it also includes over 6 in 10 Republicans. So, for those who say, as we often doubt, the institutions are being challenged, no one believes in things anymore. Well, in Georgia, ground zero, they still believe in their electoral process will be ones that will have integrity and honesty behind it. So that's a good news. I mean, that's a good news figure coming out of this data.
So, is ChatGPT and AI a teacher's worst nightmare or a tool to further education and learning? Well, using AI in school is really controversial right now, and some are seeing it as plagiarism, while others think that AI is the future of learning.
But since we're here on a college campus, we thought maybe we won't just talk about it, but maybe we should ask the people in the trenches, students and educators, what they think about what's happening with AI in education. So Athen and Rebecca, you're both seniors here, and in a bit we're going to bring in a professor who is using ChatGPT in his classes here at Marist. In fact, he's requiring it of his students to use it.
But before we get to that, first we're going to go over some data. According to Pew, 2/3 of teens have heard of ChatGPT, and 23% have heard a lot about it. But 1 in 5 high school age students, that's ages 13 to 17, who have heard of ChatGPT have used it for schoolwork. And what do they think of using ChatGPT? Largely students like getting help from ChatGPT. 7 in 10 teens who have heard of it say that it's acceptable to use when looking at a topic that's entirely new to them. But students don't think ChatGPT should be doing all the work for itself. Only 1 in 5 teens who have heard of ChatGPT say it's acceptable to use it to write essays. 57% said that it's not acceptable at all. 18% say they're not sure about researching new topics, and 24% say they're not sure about solving math problems using ChatGPT. Maybe that's just because they haven't put much thought into the topic, though. Students who have heard a lot about ChatGPT are way more likely to think that AI assistance is acceptable than those who have heard a little about it.
But what about the parents? So should their children turn to ChatGPT for homework help?
Well, so according to polling from Parents for School Options, over 80% of parents believe that access to AI would hurt students' learning potential because they wouldn't be doing their own work. They'd just be using AI programs. Yeah, the same poll showed that 76% of parents believe that the availability of AI will have a negative impact on students' opportunities to have one-on-one instruction with their teachers because they would just be turning to AI. Yeah, so parents think AI will be a big change, and 72% are also concerned about AI technology. 68% are worried that AI will be interfering with their kids' career post high school. 55% of these same parents surveyed want to see more regulation on AI in K through 12 education, versus 17% who are in opposition of that regulation. According to the Parents for School options, 45% of parents said that K through 12 schools should be able to use AI when evaluating students' academic performance.
So parents seem to be a little on the fence about this, or maybe more so worried. Students seem to have a good opinion for those who actually use it or have heard of it. But what about the other side of this, as teachers and professors? AI is here whether they like it or not, and it's already having major implications in how they teach. What does the data show about what educators think?
Yeah, well, so AI has been grading student assignments longer than you might realize, but it's mostly used in big high schools, college classes with a lot of students, not in younger students that need one-on-one feedback from teachers. 53% of teachers actually support using AI to make lesson plans, and about half of teachers think that it should be able to help them grade papers. But they're also worried that AI could potentially take their jobs. 44% that said that they believe that AI can be used to provide direct teaching and instruction to students, which is not good. And with regards to their students, teachers are pretty divided on whether their students should be using AI. 43% said it's okay for students to be using AI on their schoolwork, but a whole nother 43% are against students using AI on assignments.
So let's open this up. The two of you are in your last semesters just as AI begins to really take hold in education. And Dr. Chiaoji is an assistant professor of communications here at Marist who is using AI in classes. Dr. G, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I've been to a couple of education and AI conferences in the last year, and there is a lot of panic among educators that the sky is falling. But you're using AI in your classrooms. Can you talk a little bit about why and how you're using it and what you think about it as a teaching tool?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm really not the first person to introduce the AI in the classroom. In fact, many of my colleagues have done so already with moderate success. But I suppose the way that I use it, which makes it a little bit different from many of my colleagues, is that I actually mandate my students to use AI and large language models because I think in the kinds of job market that they will be facing in a year or so, pretty much all the potential employers will be asking them to use AIs to complete works. And hence, I want to expose my students to AIs as soon as possible. And therefore, no matter it's a paper or a research project, or a public presentation or a case study, in virtually all the assignment, I ask them to use AIs. However, with one tweak, that is to document how they actually used it. So I give them a prompt to detail how they interacted with AI to generate those responses so that later on, I can go back and review the ways in which they interacted with AI so that I know how they are getting informed or how they leverage AI to accomplish their works.
We should, in the spirit of full disclosure, as journalists do, indicate that Rebecca is a student of yours. So Rebecca, go as tough as you want on your professor here. What questions do you have?
Yeah, it's been very interesting so far using ChatGPT to create my capstone project, my final project for my communications degree at Marist. And I have always wondered in class how long you've been doing this policy and how many classes you've seen go through this process of using ChatGPT on their capstones.
Okay. Well, I have to admit, you are among my first batch of students being experimented on this policy. And the reason being that I was on sabbatical last fall. So I spent the entire fall semester trying to understand the whole new large language models that are on the market and trying to really incorporate it deeply in my classes, because I know once I get back on campus and start to teach again, I cannot just go with my old style, namely asking students to pretend that the tool does not exist, and I'll grade them as if they are 100% being written by the students. So it is with that kind of spirit, I decided that this semester I have to do something differently. However, the prompt or the way that I ask you guys to engage with ChatGPT or other language models with documentations, those have been kind of in my mind for a while because the way that I approach it, I think about this issue is that because I cannot prevent students from using that, why don't I just fully embrace it? And B, in the future, in a industry or in the job market, the potential employers will ask you, have you ever exposed to AI or how you used AI to accomplish certain tasks? And I think if I can give the student a leg up in those competitions, that would be a good thing to do. So that is the kind of the rationale behind the decisions. And so far, I should say, I think I've achieved some of those goals with moderate success, but I do plan to kind of going forward with more specific introductions or workshop sessions to introduce students some ways to better engage with AI. But at this moment, I would like to see more kind of raw data in terms of to observe how you guys interact with AI.
Yeah. And was there a turning point in the development of AI that made you feel that you had to start mandating it in your classroom?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, again, when ChatGPT first released in, I think it was a year or so ago, I think the whole kind of education sector was kind of shocked. And the understandable first response is that first, let's stop people from using it. And at that moment, some news release from other parts of the world suggest that there are certain universities, say in Hong Kong and other places, decided that we will ban ChatGPT on campus. Just limit the IP address so that student cannot access it. Well, a semester later, all the admins across the globe found out that it does not work because students have all sorts of genius ways to access that. And therefore, we are back to the drawing board trying to figure out how to resolve this issue. And at that very moment, I thought to myself that, well, if I have to teach again, I cannot proceed with the old ways. And hence, why don't we fully embrace it? And to be honest, once I decided to do so, I did realize that students are much happier, much more honest, and much more willing to use all kinds of ways to interact with AI, which is a really good thing. So I think with that spirit, I would definitely continue with that kind of practice.
Yeah, you kind of just touched on this of how students are interacting with the AI programs, but do you think, have they told you that this is benefiting them? Do some of them kind of find it difficult at first to use this? Because this is completely different than like any of the classes I've had where it's mandated. Do you find that students are kind of struggling with it, or do they find it easy to use?
That's a very good question. So first of all, yes, indeed, your question actually taps into one observation that I had already had in some of my other classes, which is that some students appear to be quite comfortable with interacting with AI. They would trying to be smart, prompt engineers, try to ask questions in multiple ways, in ways that can generate multiple versions of the answers. Versus other students, they would simply copy and paste my instructions and dump it into the chat box and just copy and paste whatever answers that ChatGPT provides. I mean, I can hardly blame them for doing that. I understand that being a college student is stressful. You're juggling between multiple assignments and due days at the same time. I've gone through that, my fair share of that. So I can't really blame them. But in those scenarios, all I can do is to emphasize to them that the way that they work with AI matters. If you are only copying and pasting the answers from ChatGPT or Gemini, there would be at least dozens of others who are doing the exact same thing. So pretty much you are guaranteed to be doing or showing the exact same work as some of your other peers. So that's kind of the one quote unquote downside. But I think the really encouraging thing is that once I point that issue to some of the students, they start to realize that issue pretty quickly. And later on in those documentations that I ask them to provide, you would see a gradual shift in terms of the ways they interact with AI. So they would ask follow-ups. Sometimes they would ask for different perspectives, all of which I think are essential in terms of using AI. But I mean, in terms of really sophisticated ways, I mean, I have already seen some students attempting to use AI to analyze data. So be it from survey data or some other kind of qualitative textual data, which is just amazing. I think this goes to show how much the students can teach me in terms of how to use AI. And I would definitely open to see more genius ways of playing around with this kind of large language models in the future as well. So
one of the things I think that people outside of education think is, oh, well, this is just a way for students to cheat, right? You make an assignment and they put in a prompt in Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT and the paper's written and they turn it in. Maybe they make a few, they change some things here and there. One of the things you mentioned is that one of your rationales for this is to prepare students for the working world. Well, that is the working world right now, though. It's like how many people and how many companies are writing a marketing memo that actually they're not writing. So I wonder how you kind of teach that balance of in the working world, what I'm asking you not to do is probably what a lot of people are doing. And I'm asking you to do something more interesting and innovative and to really to push the bounds of what ChatGPT or any LLM, any of these AI models can do for the way you think, analyze, strategize, that kind of stuff. How do you go about that with students?
Right. That is a fantastic question. But I want to first echo with what you just said a moment ago about the kind of the inevitable decision for students to incorporate with AI to kind of save some time for their own work. Because I think just a month or so ago, I've seen some large survey from Japan surveying over 10,000 college students, private or public students, asking them how frequent they use AI, ChatGPT, and whether or not what tasks they use for. And nearly 50% of the participants indicated that they did use AI frequently for their works. And of those 50%, nearly a half said that they frequently use that for assignments-related issues, for saving some time, or for just to make the tasks easy. So I think this just again goes to show that there's no way we can pretend this didn't happen. But then it comes down to the question of how do you actually nudge the student to kind of engage with the systems in a more deeper or kind of sophisticated ways. What I try to do in my class is that I'll give some examples. I haven't done that too much in my capping class, which is the one that Rebecca is taking right now. But with my sophomores class, I show some examples as to how I ask questions and what kind of potential tasks it can do, and also what kind of problems that people might bump into. For instance, I might ask the assistant to write me a literature review about the social comparison theory. And the AI goes about to make up some citations, and I will copy and paste that exact citation into Google Scholar and show the students that it does not exist, despite the fact that this journal sounds pretty official and authoritative, but they have to double check it to make sure that all the citations are correct. And also, sometimes the language appears to be quite robotic and kind of detached to the human experience. In which case, I think those are definitely the areas of improvements.
And you mentioned in class that sometimes students have an interesting way of interacting with AI and the way that they're speaking to the AI models. What kinds of things are you seeing in these conversations when you're looking through them?
Yes. So actually, I was just talking about that very example to my social media and society class students. So the very example that Rebecca just mentioned is that early on in the semester with this cohort of capstone students, I did notice in some of their documentations, that is the shared link that they provided, some of them appeared to be extremely polite with ChatGPT. So what they did is that they would ask a bunch of questions. After ChatGPT provided their answers, they say, "Thank you" in the chat box. And of course, as you might imagine, the model says, "Well, you're welcome and happy to help you in the future." So I was so mesmerized with that kind of interaction. So the next day, I get into the classroom, I actually asked some of them who did that. I was asking them why they appeared to be so polite with ChatGPT, given the knowledge, of course, that we all know they're not human. And their answer is that being polite is, in general, a good thing, and perhaps they would be nice to them as well in terms of the kinds of answer they get. In other words, they would generate perhaps less amount of BS. And the other thing is that this is already another answer or another perspective, which is a little bit science fictional, is that they are somewhat worried that in the future, once AI gains consciousness, they would remember the kinds of interactions they had. So let's say if Rebecca had unfortunately insulted ChatGPT at one point, they would have the memory and hence revenge at one point, which I think, again, is kind of fictional yet quite legit, because who knows? I mean, according to current estimation, some scientists expected that the AI would gain some kind of consciousness in next decade or so, although I suspect this time horizon is really accurate. But I mean, the possibility is there. So, so I think that on some level also reflected how sophisticated our students are in terms of kind of playing around with technologies.
Yeah, they're thinking about it not like a Google, a search box like we think about it, but something different. I want to bring in both Eth and Rebecca to just weigh in on what are your experiences with AI in the classroom, and what should a professor like Dr. G here, what should he know from you guys? Eth, let me start with you about your fears, experiences, whatever it is.
Well, for me, the only times I've used it is to build an outline for work. Like I don't think I would never really rely on it for like factual information. But for like theory and putting together like an outline for a paper, I've used it before. Well, other than that, I don't touch it very often. I don't use it very much.
And Rebecca?
I didn't really use ChatGPT before Dr. G's class, but
and you're required. And to be clear, you're required to.
I'm required to use it. And at first, when I learned that I was required to use it, I was like, I don't know. I guess I'll just like finish my papers and paste them in at the end and have ChatGPT give me recommendations. But then when I was working on my independent lit review, I'd already read the literature for a grip lit review, and I was kind of struggling to come up with new things to say about it. And I didn't want to just write my group lit review again. So I had ChatGPT read all of our sources and pull out any different trends that it found throughout the research that maybe we hadn't found, so that I could pose better hypotheses across all of the different works rather than just kind of the general idea that we have of our own thesis. And that was actually really helpful, and it made the work a lot less burdensome on myself to go through and read them all again and with a fresh perspective and a fresh mind. But I've also found that, it's very limited. You can ask it to spit you out a 1,000 word response, and it will give you 200 words and say, "You're welcome. I did it." And no, it didn't, but that's okay.
So kind of a mixed bag. Last word to you, Dr. G. Are you just scratching the surface, do you think, with AI in your classes right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are only beginning to scratch the surface of the power of the large language models. I think to Rebecca's example, that very example of feeding the system multiple information and ask it to generate trends and other perspectives, those are some of the early ways of play around with this current version of AI. In the future, we might as well expect the AI to be able to generate more comprehensive and more sophisticated answers. Because as we all know, currently the AI is pretty much limited in terms of its knowledge. It has a time cut, at least for ChatGPT. It is very much limited based upon the type of data the engineers decided to feed them. And hence we see in the news that some models would act some kind of racist ways. And I think that just goes to show the potential room for the society or for the engineers to improve the technology. But on the flip side, we have to find new ways of using it. I know for a fact that some of my colleagues are using AI to instruct students to write better social media post for the ones who are interested in being a social media manager in the future, or to write better kind of public relation announcements. Or, sometimes as professors, you get emails, right? Students will use AI to write really good emails to try to excuse themselves from certain absences. And in those cases, I was like, man, this email is just so good that I will just say yes. So the truth is that people will find smart ways to use AI. And when they do experience the benefit of that, there's really no way back. I mean, if I can write every single emails that I will have to write, I would definitely not opt for not writing emails myself word by word. So yes, the future is just beginning. So we have to buckle up and see what happens.
Well, Dr. Chiachi, Assistant Professor of Communications at Marist, thanks for joining us. And for our students, Athen and Rebecca, who've been working with us for some time, you are at the vanguard here. You're about to graduate and head out into the wild blue yonder, where I think what we've just talked about is, you literally are at the birth of this, right? And you guys are the ones who are going to write the history of how this impacts all of us in society and our personal lives and our work lives. So great discussion. I'm really glad that we were all able to have this. Thanks.
Absolutely. And both of the students should come back in a couple of years and do a rerun and tell us how you feel about it.
Okay, so the fun fact is a real group participation one this time because it covers the span of our existence, the best years and worst years of our lives, and what people thought in 1971. My glasses could not detect the fine print. All right, so 2 questions. What are the best years and what are the worst years? So then we're going to go around the horn here and see what you all think. But anyway, when it comes to best years, the younger years seem to carry sway. Childhood, 14. Teenage, 15. The 20s get 21. And then it drops off and, people aren't all that cool on, aging process and whether those are going to be great years or not. Then when we get to the worst years, what we have is, again, young teenage years, 24%. But the retirement years clock in at 20%. The don't know is high for both. So people just aren't sure about this. But there's clearly, young is good or bad, depending upon which of the 2 questions that we're looking at. So I have my own theories on this as the senior citizen in the crowd. But we're going to start, we start with the youth this time. We have 2 students, as you well know, our producers. Athen, what you got?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've only lived through 2 of these periods, but I think
she's killing me already.
I think the best years, I would say either childhood or 20s. I mean, I'm
Okay.
only 21, but I like it so far. So I feel like it's definitely better than teenage years. I would say teenage years is probably the worst because it's just so awkward.
Which is what people said. But and 20, you're right in the norm here. The worst year is what you're saying, and the best at 21.
So, but wait a second. Why don't we pose this question as a hypothetical, like we do if the November election were held today?
Yeah.
So, what's your perception of the best time? Does it
I
change?
still
Does it
feel
differ?
like it's definitely like either 20s or 30s. Feel like if it's like fun wise, probably 20s. If it's like having money and like being secure, maybe like 30s or 40s. But I feel like that like middle range is probably the best. The best
Yeah.
years.
All right, Rebecca, what do you got?
Well, I haven't lived much life yet. I'm just getting started out here. But I don't know. I don't think a child was a teenager. I did really cool stuff. And I think I'm in the minority here. I kind of liked being a teenager. And I don't know. I just turned 20 like a few months ago. So I don't really know what's up with being 20 yet. So I'll let you know in a few years.
Is it your perception though that retirement years are older, that like that is not a great time? Like people who retired, you got grandparents, whatever. Is it your perception that
I feel like you start out liking it, right? Like you're excited not to have to work anymore, but then I think you start to realize there's like only so much gardening you can do or something.
Or you start hearing the flowers bloom, as it were. Yeah, different perspective. And now that I'm thoroughly depressed, Jay, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I didn't have a particularly troublesome teenage years, but I don't know. What's weird about this is it's exactly what I would expect people to say. And I've liked all of these periods. I haven't had a bad, I mean, maybe I've led some, I don't think I've led a charmed life. I don't look back on my childhood and think, oh, it was terrible, or it was just great. Teenage years, I mean, if I had to pick one that I liked more, it's probably my 30s, and I'm 60, past 60. So probably my 30s would be my favorite, but not by these margins. It's just very, very tiny differences. I mean, I wouldn't mind feeling like I felt when I was in my 30s, but I like where my brain is now, comparatively. So yeah. I don't know. I don't.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't. This is a hard one because I couldn't give an answer that I felt really strongly about in any of these cases.
See, the difference between us types and the current college student types is we have so much more perspective, and we're older but wiser. Ha ha ha. But
I think it's interesting. No, but I think to the point that Jay is making too is I think it depends upon whether you're thinking physically or mentally. I kind of look back and I like, yes, everybody knows I like to ride horses. And I bounced so much easier as a kid and as a teenager. So riding was a whole different experience because, if I fell off, the ground was soft at that point. It wasn't as hard as it is today.
The ground has gotten harder. That's what's happened, actually. Yes,
exactly,
over the years, yes.
Exactly. But yeah, mentally, I mean, I'm certainly much more comfortable in my profession, and I don't have those kinds of anxieties and sense of, do I really know what I'm doing? No, I know when I know what I'm doing something, and I know when I don't. So I realize that that's kind of a ever evolving kind of thing. And I don't have that stress that somehow I need to understand or be able to perform at a certain level without admitting that, I don't know that. I think if I were to choose, maybe the teenage years were a little tougher, despite the fact that the ground was softer. That was only because I graduated from high school in 3 years. And so I was taking my math courses in one semester instead of 2 semesters. And there was lots of homework and that kind of pressure. And probably some of my favorite would likely be, I don't know, maybe late 30s, 40s. And the reason for that is because I think that's a point at which I actually was probably somewhat still physically adept and yet, mentally coherent.
But all right, let me weigh in and say I liked the best time where
I like that.
Yeah, I liked the childhood and teenage years because I could still play baseball anytime I want to and still think that I could be a center fielder for the Yankees. Alas, that's no longer the case. The thing about retirement years, I think they're good if you've had a chance to plan for them and you have some money and you have your health. But if you don't have those things, retirement, I think, is why it's not so great. And also, so it's a mixed thing because, like I think Jay and Barb are talking about, we do feel smarter now than we did when we were younger. We started to see the nuances and all that stuff. But then again, when you break 70, you get this side. You can easily subtract. I've lived so much of a proportion, and I probably got only so much proportion left. And it's tough to reconcile that and call that great times. But on the whole, I think the good times was when you could have lots of options, and that's still your formative years. And then you have other responsibilities. So
I think the message might be simply live life and make the most of each day.
There you go. Who can object to that? Okay, well, we're going to bring you guys back in 50 years and see if you sound more like us.
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while. Heaven can wait.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis and Rebecca Hendricks.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub.
And with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.